You know, on our live streams, I wear the same shirt a lot.
Do you? Your Wednesday shirt?
It's my Wednesday shirt. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Cindy
And Christine.
with Candles and Supplies. And today we are discussing one of my favorite subjects, candle wicking. Wick is a 4-letter word. Remember that. So it's one of the most frustrating parts of making candles because it's overwhelming. There's tons of wicks, tons of wick types and everything. When you're first starting, you don't know where to go and look and this and that. So let's just do a quick check, make sure everybody's on there. Give us a wave, give us a shout out if you're out there. That way we know that all of our technology is working and I didn't turn off any important settings that I shouldn't have. So if you hear us and see us, wave or say hi, let us know who you are and where you're from too. So we always like knowing that. If you guys have any questions as we go along, make sure to post them in there. We get tons and tons of questions here, people calling in with questions and stuff like that. So we'd like to answer them all.
We'll go back at the end and go through all the questions. So hang on, just put them in there and then
we will
we'll get through our spiel and then we'll go through all the questions.
Yeah, thank you to those that emailed in some questions too. Most of that stuff I have in the presentation, but we will go over your questions at the end too. So I see people waving and saying hi, hello from Connecticut. So awesome. Everybody's in there. So happy Wednesday. Let's talk about candle wicking. So this is fun. Most people, I feel like wicks are but complicated. So they're complicated in the thing that there's so many, and you know, you want to pick the right one and stuff like that. And sometimes you just can't get the right burn. Well, there's a lot of variables in it too. So a lot of things that go into candle wicking and stuff. First and number one thing, when you're test burn just your wax and just your jar or your mold, no fragrance, no color. Fragrance and color, not color so much, but fragrance has a lot to do with how the candle burns. So always test burn without fragrance. That way you know if it's your wax and the wick combination, if it's the fragrance or not. So, but that makes a big difference. So number one, always test burn without fragrance. So I think that's like a couple of things in here, a couple questions. It was all probably came down to the fragrance oil. Let's talk about what a wick is. So a wick goes in the center of your candle, right? And you light it up and then it has flame. So, but what a wick actually really does and what it is, if you look at a wick, look close. I don't know if you've ever looked close at your wicks or not. So this is just a piece of raw wicking. But if you ever look close at your wicks, if you get pre-tab wicks and it has the wax coating off, kind of get some of the wax coating off and really analyze the wicks. So it's a very complicated structure of little fibers, you know, cotton fibers, your hemp, if you use the hemp wicks and stuff like that, little fibers all braided or knitted together, depending on the manufacturer. Some people say their wicks are braided. Some people say their wicks are knitted. I think it depends on the machines that they buy, but they're all braided or knitted together in a certain pattern. And what this pattern does is it draws the wax up from the candle, right, into the flame. Because in order for a flame to burn, it needs fuel and it needs air. So the air is in the air above the candle and your wax is the fuel. So the wick actually acts like a straw. And if this is basic, I'm sorry, but like I feel like this is very important to know because a lot of people get frustrated with wicks and you're analyzing the things that aren't.
This is candle wicking 101. So.
This is 101. That's correct. You're analyzing things that, you know, maybe you shouldn't analyze at that point, but just think about the action. So like, that process of the wax being drawn up into the flame is called capillary action. We'll call it a straw. So think of it as a straw. So the wicking is a straw that draws the wax up into the flame. So you want to have, you know, on a bigger candle, you obviously want to have a bigger flame because you need a bigger melt pool and to draw more wax up in it to get a bigger melt pool. A brighter flame will give you more melted wax and more scent throw, right? Your scent throw is how the candle smells when the candle's burning. For the hot throw. Cold throw is how the candle smells when you just take the lid off the jar. So the wick's entire function is to draw the wax up into the flame, right? Into the air so that you get the flame. If it's too small, it's not going to draw enough wax up. It's going to struggle. It'd be a small flame and struggle and that type of thing. If it's too big, it's going to be a torch and have a big flame. So that's all what it comes down to. So when you're choosing your wick, think about, you know, when you're saying I have had no success, well, that could mean a lot of different things. Do you need a bigger size? Do you need a different type? That type of thing. So, but think about the whole job. If it's not drawing it up, if it's not giving you the proper burn, the wick isn't doing its job and you need a different wick. So,
or a different wax or a different fragrance.
Right. There's Like there's lots of variables, but this is wicking 101.
Right.
So you may not be using the correct type or whatever. So what makes a wick work or not work? So like basically you want to choose the type of wick. First thing you want to do is the type of wax that you're using and the type of candle that you're using. And that's going to determine what type of wick you're using. In wicking itself, it's put up in different ways. So this is a raw wick. So a raw means it's just been knitted. It's off the knitting machine. There's no wax on it. There's no tabs, no anything. It's the wick just how it is. And you can see the fun fibers. If it unravels, you can see how many fibers there is. Like this little one has like 22 different strands, 24 different strands in this that are all knitted together. And then there's primed wicking. So primed wicking is simply that wicking, and it goes through a waxing machine. So the wick goes through, it gets dipped into wax. The raw wick goes through, gets dipped into wax, and then it goes through a little die that squeezes the wax out. What it does is pushing the wax in between the different fibers of the wick to open up the wicking so it gives a better burn. It goes through this process like 6 different times. So it goes into the wax, comes out of the wax, goes through water to cool it off, goes into the wax, goes through the little die, gets squeezed out, goes through the water, does that 6 different times until it's primed. So most of you, if you buy pre-tab wicks, that's our best seller. If you buy pre-tab wicks, you'll notice it has a waxy coating on the outside. That is a primed wick. You need to prime it to put it through the tabbing machine. So the wick tab is on the bottom. That's the little metal thing that extinguishes the wick and keeps it upright. You need to glue it to the bottom of the candle, keep it upright during burning and stuff like that. So it needs to be primed to go through the wick machines to get the tab on the bottom. The little tab on the bottom, you'll notice it has a neck right there. And on your burning instructions, there you go, Instagram. On your burning instructions, it says never burn your candle below 1/4 inch. Well, you notice that the neck on this is about 1/4 inch high. So theoretically, this should extinguish when the flame hits this little tab and goes in there. It should extinguish itself. So theoretically, people won't burn their candles too long or anything like that.
It's like a safety device in a way too.
Exactly. Exactly. ASTM guidelines want 6 millimeters. So all of our wicks are done with 6 millimeters. So most of them out there are done with 6 millimeters too. And then this is called a pre-tab wick just because it has the wick tab already on it. That's our most popular. That's what that is. And then wooden wicks. Wooden wicks are a thing too. So
newer to the market.
It's newer to the market, but very popular. They also have a little tab, and you would just put the wood wick inside. You would tab it yourself. You don't tap those. So that way you can get, the height and everything that you want. It's a little bit adjustable. You can get the height that you want and trim it where you want and stuff like that too. But it still has a tab. That way the wick stays upright while the candle's burning. It doesn't fall over, become a fire hazard or anything like that. So the wick tabs are pretty much a little safety device. And there's different wick types. So this is where I was getting into. So you want to select for the type of candle that you're using, you want to select the correct type. So this is just a plain cotton wick. It's called a flat braid, and you can kind of see that it's flat in appearance. So there's different types of flat braids, like Heinz coreless CD wicks are flat braids, LX wicks, just plain cotton wicks. They're all examples of flat braid wick. Flat braid wicks are very good for pillar candles, novelty candles, that type of thing. So you don't want to use these necessarily because there's no it's not very substantial. It's flat. They're a little harder to use in containers because they want to relax and bend over and make S shapes when the candle's burning and stuff like that too. Then there's a square braid. So this one's a square braid cotton. And if you look at it, it might be hard to see in the video, but if you look at it, it's actually square in shape. And it's knitted in the pattern that makes it square. And what this does is it gives a little bit hotter of a burn than a flat braid wick, because the wick is round instead of flat.
More wick.
Right. There's more wick.
Yeah.
So it gives it a little bit hotter of a burn. Flat braid wicks, all the flat braid wicks too, when they're burning, they kind of curl over. So when it's burning, it'll curl. Our curled candle. It curls a little bit when it burns. It's supposed to do that. So that's just the way that burns. Whereas a square braid will stand up straight. It doesn't have much curl. It may have a little mushroom, but not much of a mushroom either. Some good examples of square braid wicks are just plain cotton wicks like this one. RRD wicks, they're also square braid. just has a little more backbone. So on things like, if you have beeswax candles and you have a hard time burning it, maybe go from a flat braid to a square braid. So square braid's very popular for beeswax because it just gives a little more burn, just a little more heat, which, difficult burning waxes need. Palm waxes, beeswax, stuff like that. So that's a very good wick to choose for those types of waxes. And then there's cord wicks. Cord wicks are very popular. They're really great when you first start making candles because the core inside, so I'll try to show this to you. These are different kind of cord wicks, but if you look inside, you can see like either the paper, do that. Either the paper or the zinc, or the ultra core actually has a very small core in there too. It's a little hard to tell. It's a little more subtle.
Yeah, theirs is cotton, right? Like cotton.
Right. Yeah, it's a special kind of cotton material on the inside. So paper cores have a brown one on the inside. But what a cord wick does, it gives a little bit hotter burn. So these cord wicks are only for containers. You don't want to use them in pillars or anything like that because they do burn hotter. But it has a backbone. So I call it a backbone. The core acts like a backbone. So it stands up nice and straight when you're making the candle and also while the candle's burning. So if you have a wick, like this, like the flat braid, that tends to be very soft and supple. Think about if your customer, like if you're selling your candles or giving them away or something like that, and your customer's burning them, if it doesn't have a little bit of a backbone and they decide to light their candle, let it burn all day, even though you told them not to and your burning instructions says not to, you never know what they're going to do. But a cord wick will stand up nice and straight. They're also very good when you're starting out because the cord wicks just kind of stand up there like all on their own. They're very nice to make candles with because they're easy. You don't need to babysit them as much. They don't flop over, anything like that. So, and they give a little bit hotter burn. So in situations, where your candle's like, not burning out all the way or something like that, a cord wick might be a good choice. So this is an example of tunneling. Tunneling is when the wick burns straight down the middle and not to the outside. And there's a couple reasons for that. It could be the wrong type of wick. It could be, too much fragrance. That's why I say burn without fragrance, because if you add too much fragrance, it could affect the burn. Either way, it could make it burn hotter or cooler, or it could be the wrong type of wick. So I tested this out just to see how low we could go on there, and it was a new wax and stuff like that. So you always want it in a perfect world. You want the wax and wick to consume themselves at the exact same rate. So you don't want a big, giant high flame, but you want a nice melt pull in the candle and a nice scent throw. You don't want soot in the top or anything like that. So all that sounds so nice and easy. The wax and wick should just consume themselves at the same rate in the end. But it gets tricky, especially when you're really fine tuning. If you're coming out with the candle line, really fine tuning, and you want a great burn and stuff like that. So it gets a little tricky. So there's different brands within each type. I went over that a little bit, with the cord wick. The cord wick also made mushroom. A lot of people will use the cord wick by mushroom. That's when you burn the candle and you notice like after a couple hours, there's a big kind of blob on the top.
There's a little one.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a little mushroom. There's a little bit of a blob on the top. Cord wicks always mushroom. So if you want a wick that does not mushroom, some people like the mushroom because what that does is kind of disperse the heat in the candle and give you a wider melt pool. But some people don't like the mushrooms. So mushrooms, it doesn't mean just because you have a mushroom that your candle's going to soot and smoke. It doesn't always do that. That's the amount of fragrance that you would use in there pretty much does that, or the size of the wick.
Or if you're not trimming your wick.
Or if you're not trimming it, yes. So cord wicks will typically burn with a mushroom. If you like that, that's great. Some people say it makes their candle smell better when they get a mushroom and it gives a better melt pool. They claim it makes their candle smell better. But sometimes it's a downfall. People don't want to see that because then when you extinguish the candle, some of the mushroom breaks off and then you have little black pieces in your candle and stuff like that. If you don't trim it, if you just blow it out, then it's brittle, so it may fall into the wax. So that might be a pitfall. Cord wicks are generally friendly with like all types of waxes too. So they're a good, easy choice. Like if you're just trying out a bunch of different waxes and you want a wick that's going to kind of burn and everything, cord wicks are a good choice for that. So the only thing you don't want to do, zinc core and soy wax does not get along. So you don't want to use that. But paper core, the ultra cores, they burn in just about everything. So, yeah. And then the flat braid, they're good for, we're going back to pillars, anything flat braid, pillars, taper candles. Think about dinner tapers. You don't want too big of a wick in a dinner taper, right? You don't want something that burns really hot like you would in this size jar or anything. Otherwise, it's just wax is gonna go all over. So flat braids are good for tapers, good for novelty candles like the body candles that are all popular now, or used to be anyway. I don't know if they're still a thing. Very good for that type of thing because you can really, it gives a nice gentle burn. They, like I said, they burn with a little curl, and they're pretty friendly with all types of waxes too. Usually waxes that you would use in a pillar or novelty candle or something like that would be like a 141 melt point or higher, or a paraffin. Even the soy, it's a natural wick, it's all cotton, so that gets along with the soy too if you're using the soy pillar blend. So pretty much it's friendly with all types of waxes as well. And then the square braid, like I said, that works a lot the same as the flat braid, only just gives a little bit hotter of a burn. So that's good for beeswax. So beeswax people, like square braid is excellent. So anything with a square braid is going to burn a little hotter for you because you just need a little bit hotter burn in the beeswax. And like I said, regular cotton or Weedos, they're great square braid ones. So, and they're also square shaped. And so then when you're choosing, so first we have wick charts on our site. Talk about wick charts. So these are amazing. We have these posted to our site and you can download them. When you're choosing what type of wick, like I said, you have to know what kind of candle that you're making. You can't just, one size doesn't fit all, unfortunately. You want to figure out the type of candle that you're making and you want to choose your wax. And then you can print out these wick charts. These are great to have on hand and hang up and stuff like that. So how we sorted this is first by wax type. So you're going to go and find the wax that you're using. And once you find that, over here is the measurements. So the first thing we have is like tea lights. Votives, and then 2 to 3 inch, 2.5 to 3.5, 3 to 4 inch. So it gives you the different size candles. And what that means when we're choosing size for the wick. So once you choose your type of candle that you're making, you go to the wax, and it's going to give you wick recommendations because there's a whole bunch of recommendations, and it really depends on how you like your candle to burn. Some people get annoyed when they go into wick chart and they're like, okay, well that gives me 6 recommendations. What do I choose? So
there's a range in those too. So the diameter,
there is a range.
So there's on there because the range, and then
right. It's better to choose like middle of the road on everything. So when you're choosing wick sizes, like what size you're going to use in your candle, what you want to do is measure your candle across the diameter. So like you would put a ruler on your candle, measure it across. So you always want to go by the diameter because that's the size melt pool that you're going to need, right? So if we measure this one, this jar is like 2 5/8 in diameter. So I'm going to go to the wick chart, pull up our beautiful wick chart. Oh, we're using soy wax. So we're going to go to 2 5/8. So that's pretty much a little bit over 2.5. So that would fall in the 2.5 to 3.5 inch range. Right. Well, that's a wide variety, 2.5 to 3 inch. That's a full 1 inch variable. So what I'm going to do on here, like it says, it gives 2 recommendations. We'll just pick CD wicks, 2 recommendations, CD8 or CD10. So I know it's 2 5/8, which is pretty close to 2.5, which is on the smaller size of the recommendation. I'll probably start with the CD8. If it was, if the jar was wider, if it was like, a 3.5 inch jar, I would probably go with the CD10 because that's on the hotter recommendations. One thing nice that all the wick manufacturers did when you're looking at the sizes, the higher the number of the wick size, the hotter it's going to burn. Right. So on Heinz Corliss, for instance, like CD3 is the lowest and CD22 is the highest. So 3 is a lower number than 22. So 3 is going to be a smaller wick, and you would use that in a smaller candle. Ultra cores are nice. They actually give you the diameter that they recommend for paraffin. So like an ultra core 2.0 would be good in a 2 inch candle. So they're really nice about that. And then the other ones, it could be like, a zinc core will come in like a 44-24-18 or a 60-44-24. So the 44-24, since it starts with 44, that's a lower number than the 60. So that's going to be a cooler wick and burn cooler. It's a nice thing that all the wick manufacturers did, even though they all have their own sets of numbers and stuff like that. The smaller the number, the smaller the candle it goes into, right? Because it's the smaller the burn on it. So they were nice about that. So when you have a couple different choices and you know what the numbers are mean, whatever, the lower the number, the smaller it's going to burn. So if you have a jar that's like right, this is 2.5 to 3.5, this is 2 5/8, it's right on the lower side of that recommendation, you would go with the smaller size wick. Another thing that kind of matters when you're choosing a wick size, so if you have a couple different sizes to choose from and you're like, I don't know, that's kind of weird. think about jars. So this crazy jar here. So on the bottom, this jar is, it's about 4 inches wide. Okay. 4 inches is a pretty wide candle. That gets to the point where you're probably not going to get one wick to burn the whole width of it. But the opening here that you have, it has like a 3-inch opening. If I measure that, that's 3 inches. So then you'll say, all right, most of the wax in this jar is going to be 4 inches. But see, this jar is a very thick, heavy jar, and it's got a tapered neck on it. So that's going to hold more heat. Just the thick glass itself holds heat, and then the neck is constricting the oxygen from going in there. So that's going to hold more heat too. So if there's a recommendation with a hotter wick or a cooler wick, I would use the cooler wick in here. This one's fun. I put a big giant hot wick in here, and you can see the melt pool that it got actually got dark. Even though it didn't burn all the way out, because it's not the right type of wick for this wax, even though it didn't burn all the way out, it got so hot that it turned the wax a different color. That's too hot of a burn. Just did that for fun. We do all kinds of fun things here, see what we can light on fire. But that would be too hot of a wick in here. So because it turned the melt pool a different color. We see that a lot.
Yeah, so that's a good thing to note, because sometimes people will be like, oh, well, it's not burning hot enough, it's not getting the sides.
Right.
But it just might not be the right wick, because if it's changing color like that, obviously something.
Exactly. So this one, things went badly. So it's got 2 problems. It was tunneling in the middle, right? It only burned so wide, but the melt pool it did get was screaming, screaming hot. So definitely the wrong wick type. At this point, I would be like, I need to go to a different type. This isn't working for me. Right. Move on.
So if you had that same melt pool size, but normal color wax, you could just up that same wick.
Go with the same size, right? Yeah. So if this was burning and it was just like tunneling down and struggling, then I would go to a higher size wick, like a bigger wick. But since it burned so hot and the melt pool got deep and actually turned color, it's too hot of a wick. It's burning just too hot for this. So even though it's not achieving a full melt pool, it's not burning great.
A little counterintuitive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this went from Can of Wicking 101 to Advanced Wicking. And you only get this by test burning. You're not going to know this until you test burn your candles. So it could also be a fragrance thing. I did scent this one. This one's scented. So it could also be a fragrance thing. That's why it's important to test burn your candles without fragrance, because the fragrance may turn every single time. It depends. So this one happens to be a vanilla. This could be over time the vanilla turned to colors and stuff like that. But I remember it was a really hot wick. You can also see around the top of the jar where it got a bit of soot. So it was burning too hot. Sometimes if it's burning too hot and the flame's really high and everything like that, it'll throw soot. Even though, you're using soy wax, you're using plant wax, you're using beeswax. You can get a beeswax candle to smoke if you have too much fragrance and too hot of a wick in there. It can smoke. So, because it's just too big of a thing. Imagine putting your shoelace in a candle. I mean, a shoelace is a knitted piece of cotton too, right? That's going to burn really hot and really fast and everything. So that's not going to work, and that's going to soot even if you're using beeswax. So it could be the type of wick. So this candle, looking back on that in hindsight, I would go to a different type of wick. This isn't working. Another thing too, we'll talk about double wicking a little bit. So on a 4-inch jar.
We did another live that had double wicking in it.
We did, yeah. We'll go over that. So we did do another live where you can watch like exactly how to double wick. But when choosing the wick size, you would measure the jar. If you're going to use 2 wicks, take the measurement, divide it by 2, right? Because you only need the melt pool for that size, for half the size in there, since there's 2 wicks. If you're going to use 3 wicks, you divide it by 3. So this is a 4-inch jar. I would choose a wick that needs a 2-inch melt pool. If I was using 2, I would choose a wick that needs a, 4 divided by 3, I think it's like 1.25. So I would choose a wick that uses an 1.25 inch. So it's that type of melt pool. So you always need to divide it. And then when double wicking, so even though these are both 4-inch jars and they're the same on the bottom, this one has a neck on it. So it's going to be harder to double wick, right? Because remember, this is going to burn a little hotter. So because it has the neck and it's a thick jar. So double wicking this one may not be a good choice. If you look at it, be like, well, it is a good choice because it didn't burn all the way to the edge. So if you try double wicking, you may have to really, really go with a very small wick that you would think wouldn't even work in here. But be careful double wicking jars, because you don't want the wick to get too close to the jar, or it could break open. So that's that. So what it really comes down to in wicking candle jars and stuff like that. So you choose the wick by the type of wax that you're using and the type of candle that you're making. And then you choose the wick size by how wide the candle is, right? And then when your candle's burning, when your test burning, if it's struggling and not burning how it should, not you have a lot of leftover wax, it's tunneling down the middle, go to a bigger size. As long as the melt pool looks good, it's not dark, it's not sooting, go to a larger size. If you're all the way up at the top size and it still doesn't want to do a melt pool, switch a wick type. So switch the type of wick, because sometimes the wicks, especially the bigger sizes, they can be so thick that they're just, that's all it has to give. So the wicks burn. That's why there's many different wicks. They burn different. Like even though a 24 ply flat braid does a 3-inch candle or 2.5-inch candle, and so does a 2/0 square braid. This is going to provide a hotter burn for you than this one. So you may need a wick. You may need to go to a cord wick that goes to a hotter burn if you're using just a regular cotton wick in that candle. So switch wicks types if you're all the way at the top. If your candle on the other end of it is burning with a big bright flame, sooting, dancing, that type of thing, you go to a smaller size, right? Think about the whole straw. Like if it's doing too much and burning too bright and this and that, you want to go to a different straw size, a smaller straw. If you get a milkshake, all right, here's a good one. If you get a milkshake and it's all frozen and thick and stuff, you need a big wide straw to get any of the milkshake up through the straw, right? But then on the other hand, if you're drinking a sangria or martini, if you use that big thick straw, you're going to get drunk real quick. Too effective, right? You want a thinner straw.
Like little cocktail
Slow it
straws.
down, yeah. Slow it down. So candle wicks are the same way. So you can totally control the hotness by the size wick you use. So
Yeah, and all of so we have the wick charts that all of the waxes with the recommendations on there too, and each wax on our website too has the type of wicks that we recommend for that specific wax
right
as well.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Some just
there to
don't
get
work
you
well.
started
So
off.
like we've never had soy candles that burn nicely with zinc wicks. But if you're using, like a soy paraffin blend, you can use zinc wicks. It burns just fine. Palm wax, if you're doing palm wax, that's very picky. It's not very friendly with anything. So palm wax, you need a square braid or a cotton or something like that just to get it burn. But then on the other hand, if you use the ultra core, which is a cord wick, and it's like a cotton material, if you use that, it burns like a torch. So it doesn't want to work and will soot. I can't believe you can get palm wax to soot, but with an ultra core wick, you can. So that's when you switch wick types, if it's just a complete fail all over the place. So yeah. So that's for my presentation. Now we're going to go over questions. I see a lot of comments and a lot of questions in there. First, we'll go through the ones that emailed. And Alicia emailed. She said,
I was going to read it to you.
Okay, good. Christine, you've been very quiet.
Well, yeah, because you've
Yeah,
been
shut up.
monologuing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make pure beeswax candles because I'm allergic to soy and don't do well with paraffin. I'd like to use both cotton and wood wicks. I already tried without success. Please help. I only want to make small 3-inch and less.
Okay. Beeswax is probably the trickiest to wick. Simply because there's a lot of variation in beeswaxes. Like there's a lot of beekeepers and they render their own beeswax, and we've just seen like all different beeswax tend to burn. You can't say, so it could be the beeswax, even different batches will burn differently. The easiest way, she doesn't really say what happened to her candle. I'm assuming that it probably tunneled and didn't want to burn. Beeswax is a very, very slow burner. So if ever, it's a good blender too. So side note, if you ever have a candle that's burning way too fast, add a little beeswax, it'll slow it down. But when you're just trying to wick beeswax candles, you're going to have to go with like a square braid wick, something that's a little hotter. Even the ultra cores work, and they're a little hotter too. Sometimes even if it's, just like a 3.5-inch, 3 is a little small to double wick, but you may want to use 2 wicks. Another thing you can do with beeswax, you can blend it with some soy wax. I don't know if she has an allergy to paraffin, but you can also blend it with some soy wax or plain white Crisco or something like that, just to soften it up and to get
What about the coconut oil too?
Coconut oil, you can add some coconut oil to it. That'll get it to burn a little easier. But first, make sure you have the right wick type, right? You want to use square braid,
Cotton.
braid cotton, even flat braid. A 3-inch candle, you don't want to use flat braid. It's not
She was
gonna be
trying
hot
to
enough.
do the wood wicks too. Will the wood wicks work in the beeswax?
Wood wicks do work in beeswax, yeah. I wouldn't. You're going to have to wick up a lot. So whatever the recommendations are, just go hotter. So maybe your fails with the wood wicks is that you just didn't try enough sizes. And again, that can vary on, the batch of beeswax that you're using, whatever type of beeswax it is. Is it white? Is it yellow? Is it, from what area the world or the country or whatever. So beeswax is a little bit tricky. So that's the trickiest one to do. But just, stick with those type of wicks and keep experimenting. So wood wicks go hotter.
So our next question is from Tammy. I'm having trouble wicking the coconut apricot soy wax with a wood wick. It seems to always darken the wax even when I have the right size. I was wondering if the CD wicks are the right way to go with this wax.
All right. So wood wicks are awesome when they burn. They burn, if you think about how this wick is going to burn, it's going to burn upright and vertical, whereas the wood wicks are going to burn horizontal. So the horizontal does give you a hotter burn. So it's beneficial because you get a melt pool faster in your candle and you get a scent throw faster. But it gets tricky because then it doesn't matter, like if somebody wants to burn a wood wick candle for 4 or 5 hours at a time, it gets very hot, right? Your melt pool is going to get really deep. It's going to turn colors and stuff like that. So I think that's what's happening.
So you might want to size down.
Right, size down on that. And sometimes it just darkens the wax anyway because you get that horizontal flame. There's more flame near the wax. So that is a challenge with the wood wicks, that they do like to darken the wax just because it gets the melt pool so warm. There's a lot of things going out there right now. I've seen that people are taking the temperatures of their jars, and somebody called in yesterday and they're like, my jar is only 140 degrees when I burn my candle. Like, it should be a lot hotter than that.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know why you want it hotter, and I don't know what's going on around about that, but don't do that. So it all goes by. If you have too big of a melt pool, you could take the temperature of your jar just to make sure it's not going to pop. It is very scary, yeah. So that's a scary thing.
It's probably good to do it just for safety reasons, but you definitely don't want your jar hotter than 140 degrees.
No, don't try to. If you're getting a full melt pool and everything, it's beautiful. You want to keep it cool. You don't want to make a fire hazard. Yeah. So CD wicks are a very good choice. It works great. CDs work great. The Heinz coreless CDs are Heinz coreless. They work great with all types of the apricot waxes, the soy waxes.
They're good with a lot of natural waxes.
Yeah, it's a very, that's an interesting wick. So we'll look at that one. So that's a flat braid wick. If you look at this, so what this is, it's like cotton and paper kind of braided together. It looks like, if anybody remembers Chinese finger traps, like from my youth, it's one of the toys we played with. So, but it looks like a Chinese finger trap. So you can always tell, like a Heinz wick, by the pattern that it makes and stuff like that. But the little braids of paper in there with the cotton just give it a little more burn, and it's gonna be cooler than your wood wicks, Tammy. But it's not gonna be as it's gonna be a little hotter than just a straight cotton wick too. So it works very good in that wax.
All right. So Joanne has. Mm-hmm. I have a coconut 83 wax I've been testing in my vessel, 14 ounce, 3.75 diameter. Wax 11 ounce with 10% fragrance oil for now. I've tried every wick possible, Eco, CD, CND, and HSP with no result. It's either the wick is too small or too big. Then I changed to another wax, the Cocoa Apricot Creme. So far, I have not found the right wick. I'm doing some testing now with CD4. Melt pool is good. Container is very hot, over 140 degrees after 6 hours. I am so disappointed in getting into the point of giving up. Maybe you can help.
Okay.
There was a lot in there.
There was a lot in there. I feel like we covered a lot in the presentation. First, Joanne, I would have to say, make sure you're test burning without fragrance oil. Yep. Yep, because it sounds like if you've test burned that many things and that many candles and stuff, it sounds like you're probably doing different fragrances as well, and that could alter your burn a bit. So definitely make sure that you're testing without fragrance or color in there, number one. And then number two, I'm not sure, it just says, no result. So what's your no result? The wick lights up. Did you not get a full melt pool, that type of thing? Sometimes people get too... you want the candle to burn, you want to get a melt pool, you don't want it to soot. Other than that, you're measuring your outside of your jar, that it's good. You took the temperature because you were afraid it's too hot, which is good. But some people actually measure the size of their wick and say they can't get the correct burn. If the wax is burning and consuming itself, customers are going to complain if they have too much wax around the outside. They're going to complain if their candle catches on fire. So somewhat in between. You have to decide, well, this is going to be good enough. This is how it burns too. So I think, depending on them, I'm thinking that if you've tried that much stuff that, maybe you need to just go with, this is good enough. Maybe go out and buy some other candles. Try buying candles off the shelf and see how they burn. And you're probably going to burn a lot better than that. So sometimes we like to be our own worst critics and stuff. So, but without knowing exactly what's happening, what your problems are and stuff like that, it's hard to do. But I think a lot of this stuff in the presentation probably would help you out. So
10% fragrance oil is also a lot, depending
It
on what
is.
your fragrance oil is. And I
Right.
hope you're weighing it and not.
yes, always make sure to weigh your fragrance
hope
oil.
you're
so-
weighing that and definitely not just doing by volume, because that can be a real big problem.
Exactly.
So-
So test burn without fragrance first. So that's a big thing. You're using
Yep.
10%. You're trying to test with that. I'm assuming you're probably trying different fragrances too. Test without fragrance to get the perfect burn, because you can always do things to, alter the burn once the fragrance oil is in there if, it's too hot or not. But always test burn without the fragrance oil. So I think that's going to be your biggest thing. That way
Start
you
there,
get
know where
that.
you're at,
Mhm.
and then move up.
Yeah.
Because some fragrance oils, like we said, burn hotter or cooler.
It's
So if you know
amazing.
that good
Right.
wax for that wick for that wax,
Mhm.
and then you can just go up or down depending on what fragrance you're using.
Mhm.
So it makes it very easy.
Right. Yep.
Right. And then if you're still not happy, change wax.
Yeah. Try different wax. So
All right. Tawana, best wicks to use. What wicks to use with wax on in candles? So this is very vague.
that was a vague question. So I feel like everything that we talked about will help you. So
Yeah.
best wicks to use. What's that
Depends
going to
on
depend on?
Your wax.
Your wax. And
I mean, I do
the
have.
type of candle that you're
Right, I
doing.
do have the candle. I mean, like, I feel like you do kind of get your favorite type of wicks that if you're using like CD is my favorite type of wick. I just feel like they burn really well, and they're
Mhm.
like you can do a lot of different things. So sometimes like you'll find what your favorite wick might be. It might be the ultra core, it might be the CD, it might be a paper
If you're
core.
making dinner tapers, would you choose CDs?
No,
No.
but yeah,
you
I don't
wouldn't.
make dinner tapers though.
Yeah,
so.
they're pink. But Yeah.
But some people like are really hardcore like paper core wick. So like it really.
Mhm.
It depends on what you like, how you burn, like how you like that candle to burn,
Personal
what type
preference.
of jar you're using, what type of wax. There's a lot of things that go into that.
Mhm.
So that's,
Definitely download the wick charts though.
yeah.
So that way you'll know. So the
Yeah.
best wicks are going to be whatever wick for the type of candle that you're making and the wax that you're using.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So last one that I got submitted by email was from Donna. I'm using the recommend size and type wicks in my beeswax candles, but they don't seem to create an adequate wax pool. When I go to a large wick, it turns black and created soot. Help. So adequate wax pool, does that mean like the entire time you're burning, or it's
Right.
just
Yeah. It sounds like another beeswax question. So it sounds like when she's burning her beeswax, she's not getting a full melt pool, which is super easy to do in beeswax. Beeswax again is slow burning. Yeah. So for that, I would still, and this goes into, I've read some things on the internet. Not everything on the internet is true, believe it or not.
What?
I read some things on the internet where, beeswax, people say that beeswax will actually clean the air when you burn it. So you have a wick, you have emissions, it's not going to make the air any cleaner. So it has its own smell and own aroma and stuff, which is very, very wonderful. And that's the key to it. But yes, you can get any wax to soot if you use the wrong wick, too big of a wick. So it goes back to that. So what I would recommend for Donna is maybe she wants to use multiple wicks. So again, beeswax burns so slow that multiple wicks are okay. You can do that. And again, you can also blend it with a little bit of another wax, something easier burning like soy, coconut oil.
I love adding coconut oil to things that aren't burning easily.
It also
really helps, and it's natural.
Yeah, on a side note with beeswax, so beeswax sometimes likes to crack in your candles. You can pour 10 candles with the same batch of wax at the same temperature in the same room. 2 may crack, 8 may be perfect. Kind of frustrating with beeswax, but it's one of the fun things it likes to do. It has a sense of humor, not necessarily agreeing with our sense of humor, but it's got its own sense of humor. But you can blend it with something else and it'll smooth it out and it'll help the burn a little bit. So, and you can still keep it completely natural. So if you want to stick with beeswax and not blend it with anything else, then use multiple wicks. So, and a lot of times you don't have to blend a lot of anything else. So like, 5 or 10% coconut oil, which equals, 1 to 2 tablespoons per pound of wax. That'll make a big difference for you in the burn of the beeswax. So
Yeah, not a lot.
it's more stable. Yeah, it doesn't need to be a lot. So
And then if you are adding fragrance, that could be part of that too.
yep,
All right,
exactly.
let's start
Let's
over here
burn
with
without
Instagram
fragrance
real
first.
quick.
So, okay,
All right.
now we're gonna go through questions. If you have any questions, make sure to post them in here so we can get to you. A lot of comments today. I love it. Everybody's awake.
So wicks for 3-inch width, 12-inch in height paraffin pillar candle.
3-inch. So if you go to the wick chart, you go to your paraffin, it would be like, I would use when it's that high, I would probably use like this one, the 24 ply flat braid. just because I like how the flat braids burn in pillar candles. It's nice and steady and even down the center and everything. So, yeah. If it's a wider, if it's like 3¼ inches, you might want to go to a 30 ply, but definitely the 24 ply flat braid would be a good choice. So.
Approximately how much coconut wax should I add to IGI 6006 to calm a wick?
Good question. So what I would do is just make a candle. You don't even have to fill it all the way. So make your candle like whatever ratio it's going to be. Use 100 grams is good because then you can always get your ratios easier with that. Try adding, and you can just put this either in your oven or on a candle warmer to change wicks in between wick testing. So I would try at first adding like 10 to 20%. And if you still need to calm it, you can add a little more. So, but always test it like, 10% ratio, take good notes, write down what you do. So that way you can always refer to it back.
What's the CD on a wick? That's just the type.
That's a type. So yeah, that's made by a company, Heinz Corliss, which actually got bought out by Weedo. CD is the type. They make a few different types. They make a CD and a CDN.
It is confusing because there are so many different types of wicks.
I know, which is good because you can really fine tune and get the burn that you
Yeah.
want. But it's not good because there's a lot of choices.
Okay, we're good there.
All right, I'll go through the Facebook ones here. Look at all these people. All right. So, can I purchase a wick chart? You could, but you don't have to. We have them free on our site.
Yeah, just
Just go to our
candle making and then the wicks section. The right
Yep,
guy.
and it's the first thing. There's the link is kind of in light gray, but it says there, download our wick usage chart. So, all right. Is it just the coconut oil you get from the grocery store that you were talking about? Yep, that works just fine. We have it here or the one in the grocery store. You don't want to use the one that smells like coconut, like the raw organic or whatever, because that'll change your change the smell of your candle.
76 degrees. I don't know.
Yep, 76 degrees.
coconut
Yeah, 92 work. We actually have a specialty one, a 92, that works a lot better. So than that because it's already.
oil. I think 76 is like the standard.
It's that might make your candle oily and greasy. I like the 92 degree coconut oil. We have it here just because it's already hydrogenized and everything, so it's already partially on its way to being waxed. So that works better.
Yeah, and they think too, if you put that lower melt point degree thing in there, your candles just like summertime.
And you have to cut back on your fragrance
lower
oil.
melt point
Right.
and fragrance oil and stuff. Yeah.
And how much coconut oil? I would start with 5%. So a little bit of coconut oil makes a big difference in the candle. So you don't want to. I tried making candles just with coconut oil. Made a horrible candle. So it cracked, it bloomed, it sooted, it smoked like a chimney. So so too much coconut oil is a bad thing. All right, and was just about to tune in. Can I watch from the beginning after you finish? Yep, we always record these so you can watch the replays later. You can watch them on Facebook. You can watch them on YouTube. Christine posts Instagram too.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can always watch from the beginning later. So, what fragrances are the hardest to wick? Do you have a wick that is least affected by fragrance? So they're all affected by fragrance, and it really depends fragrance by fragrance. A lot of when you buy your fragrance oil, you always buy it by weight. So you'll notice you have to get whatever ounce size bottles you get, 16 ounce or whatever 4 ounce. You'll see that if you get 10 different ones, they're going to be all at different fill levels because of because they go by weight.
Yeah.
So not usually, but sometimes an indication could be the heavier fragrances. So the bottles that are less full, heavier fragrances could indicate a harder burner. Fragrances with a higher flash point. So if you go into the SDS and you see a fragrance with like a flash point of, greater than 200 or greater than 210 or 220, sometimes that's an indication, not always, but sometimes that's an indication that it could be a harder burner as well.
Is it cinnamon?
So cinnamon is, that could be a harder burner, and that has an incredibly high flash point and everything, so it's less flammable, right? So higher flash point means less flammable, which also means
harder to burn, aka
harder to burn. So those are a couple indications where it might give you a clue whether it's a harder burner or not. So
yeah, sometimes it's just
question.
trying it out.
Okay. How good are the Eco 10 wicks on food candles with soy wax? That's a good question. We don't carry the Eco wicks. I was never real impressed with how they burned. I like the CD wicks better because they give a brighter burn. We get a lot of people that call, they're having trouble with the Eco Wicks and they just need a stronger burn. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend them because I don't think they're hot enough on the food candles, because food candles, you have lots of things going on. You may have whip wax, you may have embeds, you may have just regular container wax. So the CD wicks are going to be a little more predictable for you. So, all right. Lots of questions in here. Hello from Connecticut. Pamela from Colorado. Hello from South Carolina. New York, Maryland. Oh, we got people all over the place. So
Wicking's always a big topic.
it is a big topic. Yeah. Can you use flat braids with beeswax tapers too? Yes. So that's a great question. I find like the square braid with beeswax tapers, it has to be like a real thick, like dinner taper to use the square braid. I do like using the flat braid with the beeswax as well, because it just, it's a little more forgiving than the square braid. Square braid once burn a little hot. I hate when the tapers drip, so I don't like them to be drippy. They'll never tunnel or burn down the middle like that. I've never seen that happen on tapers. So you're better off going cooler, but that's a great question. So what is a good rule of thumb for what flame height is safe? And can this be controlled with changing wick? Yes, absolutely. First, you want to make sure that the wick is trimmed properly, because flame height can determine, if the wick is not trimmed properly. Like people want to leave their wicks high and do these cute little squiggly things and stuff like that. So, and it looks adorable. They'll wrap the wick around a pencil and stuff like that. It looks adorable in a candle, but just keep in mind your customers are not going to trim that. They're going to light that and have a torch. So first, you want to make sure that the wicks are trimmed properly before determining if your flame height is too hot or not. Yeah, and then, I mean, it depends on the size of your candle and the wick size. So like if you have a tea light, you're not going to want a big, 3/4 inch wick. You're going to want, it depends on how wide your candle is and the size of it and everything too. I mean, I would think once it is high enough to where it is sooting and throwing off smoke, too high. So, and you don't want it to just be burning like with a little glow.
I feel like around like your thumbish is probably a good
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
You get like for most candles, you get too much bigger than that.
Right.
That just seems like it'd be a hazard.
For me, I like a nice,
Yeah.
I like a nice bright flame. Like I
Right.
like cord wicks and I don't mind the mushrooms. I like a nice bright flame as long as it doesn't soot. So I think that could be a personal preference too. But if it's sooting, you
or
see
if the
black
flame
smoke.
is out like over top of the candle, like outside
Yeah.
of the jar.
Probably not
That's
safe.
that's not
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. Probably not
That's
safe.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good question. What about gel wax? So gel wax is also on our wicking recommendations. Gel wax is like it likes,
generally, right?
yeah, I like the zinc in the gel wax because it always burns. It's predictable and stuff. I also like the Weedo RD wicks. That work good too. The ultra cores do work in there, but I like the other two before that. But yeah, gel wax is definitely on the wick chart too. What is the best wicks to use in soy wax? So soy likes natural wicks, right? So the Heinz CD are an excellent choice. The
Paper
ultra
core.
cores are an excellent choice. Paper cores are an excellent choice. The only thing that's really not a good choice for soy wax would be a zinc core wick, because just total fail. All of those wicks are going to burn drastically different. So depending on how you like your candle to burn, again, test burn with no fragrance in it. Get the burn that you like. And
The wood wicks are hard to burn. The soy wax too.
it is, yeah. I don't love wood wicks in soy wax, so it's very, very hard burning. Okay. And what fragrances are the hardest to wick? Do you have a, okay. Oh, we did that one. Yep.
Yeah.
That was just now. I think I got all these for some reason why they're coming up twice for me. User error. All right. I use cocoa apricot wax. Which wick would you recommend? So that, again, if you go into the wax, whatever wax you're using on our site, it gives like wick recommendations on what to use. So on the coconut apricot wax, that's a pretty friendly one. So you can use a lot of different wicks. I like the Heinz coreless is my favorite in that one, the CD wicks. And then I would choose, like a paper core or the ultra core wicks. So, and even wood wicks weren't in that. It burns decently with wood wicks. So I find the crackle in wood wicks to give me anxiety. So I don't use them too much.
It's not soothing.
It's not soothing to me. I'm just weird, but it's fun. We're all our own type of weird. Okay. Is it okay to have a little wax residue left on your glass container after burning when using the coconut apricot wax? Or would it need a different wick to make it burn completely clean with no residue? So you're always safer having a little bit of residue because the jar won't be hot. That it's a sign that the jar is cool enough, that type of thing. You don't want to have like a 1/4 inch of residue. Because then customers are going to feel like they're getting ripped off, that it's not using all the wax and stuff like that. But a little bit of wax residue, usually the natural waxes tend to leave that anyway. Like paraffins will burn a little cleaner and leave a cleaner jar, but the natural waxes, the plant waxes and stuff, they tend to leave a little bit of residue, and that's perfectly fine. It cleans up easy and stuff. I'd rather see that than too hot of a wick, like squeaky clean jar, because then it's probably got a little bit of soot at the top too. So I think that sounds like you're doing everything all right there. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a safety thing too, because I feel like people sometimes get too intense about trying to burn every inch of wax off of there,
Right.
and then you run the risk of the
Right.
jar getting too hot.
Because
And
again,
bad
you don't
things
know
happening.
if your customer's going to light it and then leave it go all
Right,
day,
that's the
or if
biggest
they're
thing.
going to light an hour at a time. So you kind of want to be in there. So and Terry says, don't the CD wicks curl? Yes, because they are a flat braid wick. All the flat braid wicks burn with the curl. So if you have too big of a wick, if you're using too big of a wick in there, or if you don't trim your wick, it's going to curl more drastically than if you trim the wick and burn for like long periods of time. But all flat braid wicks curl, all cord wicks mushroom if you burn them too long. So
Yeah. Neither of those things are a bad thing.
not a bad thing. Nope. You just want to make sure that it's not too hot. So otherwise that curl or the mushroom can soot. So okay. Looks like we're all
Everything.
caught up with questions. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, we got
that's
everybody.
good. This is a little long one this week.
This was a long one. Yeah, I kind of knew it would be. So there's a lot, but thank you all for joining. So if there's anything else you want to see, make sure to send us requests for future live streams. We got a few requests last week, which were pretty good. So we're excited about that as we build our content plan. But thanks for watching, and we will join you next week for another fun-filled episode. So have a good week,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.